He was once the most formidable manslayer of the Edo period. But now all he desires is a peaceful life with the one he loves. However, a mysterious man from a Shanghai gang arrives, driven by 14 years of burning hatred. This enigmatic figure has only one goal: to make the man who killed his sister suffer the deepest agony imaginable. The story begins in Yokohama in 1879. The city, a bustling port, breathes with the spirit of civilization and enlightenment brought by the Meiji Restoration. A train slowly pulled into the station, bringing with it a long, simmering storm of bloodshed. On the crowded platform, a man in police uniform stands watchful, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's. Unnoticed by the throng, he observes everything meticulously. He is Saito Hajime, former captain of the Shinsengumi's 3rd Unit, now serving the Home Ministry. His target? An arms dealer hiding aboard the train. Saito Hajime boards the train with his men to conduct a search. His gaze quickly fixes on a man with white hair. One of his subordinates steps forward immediately, demanding to know if this man is indeed the arms trafficker who sold ironclad warships to Shishio. Confronted by Saito Hajime, the stranger's attendant responds with arrogance, but the white-haired man himself remains utterly composed.
Moto Shinsengumi no Saito Hajime.
Calmly, he reveals Saito Hajime's true identity and proceeds to pitch his wares, everything from ironclad ships to Gatling guns. Unmoved, Saito Hajime orders his arrest on the spot. But in the next instant, the man launches a swift, unexpected attack against the officers. Saito Hajime is momentarily stunned. He asks why the man is seeking the Batosai, the manslayer, who vanished without a trace years ago. The stranger seems obsessively fixated on Kenshin's scar, pressing him repeatedly with questions about it. Chaos erupts inside the train car. The man moves with eerie grace and uncanny agility. Ordinary policemen are no match for him and are swiftly overwhelmed. Ultimately, he was cornered inside the train carriage by Saito Hajime. However, the man had no intention of fighting Saito Hajime. Meanwhile, Tokyo's streets bustle with music and merriment. At the Kamiya Dojo, everyone enjoys a rare moment of leisure. Kaoru gazes at a bride in a Western-style wedding procession passing by, lost in thought. Yahiko, seeing through her reverie, teases her about imagining her own wedding to Kenshin. Flustered and blushing, Kaoru is caught off guard, while Kenshin, ever oblivious, simply remarks on the bride's beauty, completely unaware of Kaoru's feelings. Peace appears to have washed away the bloodstains of the past, yet a faint shadow of unease still flickers in Kenshin's heart. Invited to teach swordsmanship at the Metropolitan Police Academy, he hears rumors of escalating tensions between the Meiji government and the Qing dynasty, a new war looming on the horizon. Back at the police station, Saito Hajime learns that the Shanghai gang leader has already been handed over to the Qing consulate. Thanks to consular jurisdiction, even crimes committed on Japanese soil must be adjudicated by the suspect's home country. Frustrated, Saito resolves to investigate the matter his own way, and enlists Sawagejo Cho, once a member of Shishio's Ten Swords, to gather intelligence covertly. That evening, Kenshin and his friends gather at a hot pot restaurant, sharing warmth and laughter. Kenshin looks around at this hard-won peace and smiles contentedly. Unbeknownst to them, high atop Ueno Hill, a massive cannon is aimed directly at their location. At a single command, the signal for vengeance is lit. A shell screams through the night sky and strikes the hot pot restaurant with terrifying precision. In an instant, joyous celebration turns into an inferno of fire and ruin. Kenshin and Sanosuke rush to the scene with the police, while Kaoru and Yahiko frantically search for their missing friends. Though Kenshin and his companions narrowly escape death, the restaurant's owner, Aya, and employee Sanjo suffer grievous injuries. When the group arrives at the devastated site, they find only a shattered sacred tree and a cryptic note left behind bearing two stark characters: Junchu, human retribution. Jinchu, the antithesis of Tenchu, heavenly retribution, declares, If heaven will not punish, I shall execute justice myself. Kenshin explains that these were terms often used by the manslayer in his past. Just then, Saito Hajime appears. He informs Kenshin that this attacker is the very man who supplied Shishio with ironclad warships. At Megumi's clinic, the wounded fill every room. Sanjo's condition is critical. His life hangs by a thread. Sanosuke seethes with rage at the sight of so many injured. Kaoru watches helplessly, her heart heavy with sorrow and confusion. Sanosuke asked Kaoru why Kenshin's scar on his face still hadn't faded, even after all these years. Megumi offers what sounds like a superstition. A blade wound inflicted with intense emotion will remain until that emotion finally dissipates. Kenshin touches his scar gently. Like his past sins, it refuses to fade. Late that night, Sanosuke finds Kenshin alone in quiet contemplation and urges him not to shoulder everything by himself. Suddenly, urgent knocking shatters the silence. The Maikawa Dojo, where Kenshin had previously taught swordsmanship to police officers, and Chief Uramura's residents were simultaneously attacked. The scenes were horrifying, a one-sided massacre. Kenshin and Sanosuke split up and raced to provide backup. At Chief Uramura's mansion, a man wielding strange curved blades in both hands was cutting down everyone in his path. The officer's firearms were useless against him, like toys, unable to inflict any real damage. Just as the man was about to kill Chief Uramura's wife and daughter, Kenshin arrived in time. When the attacker saw Kenshin's distinctive cross-shaped scar, a manic grin spread across his face. The two immediately clashed in fierce combat, Kenshin's reverse blade sword against the man's curved blades, neither gaining the upper hand at first. Kenshin demanded to know why he would target innocent people. He recognized that this man, like himself, had once been a manslayer who lived in darkness. During the fight, the assailant kept launching hidden sleeve darts at Kenshin. But with his exceptional swordsmanship, Kenshin ultimately overpowered him. However, the man refused to surrender. Instead, he ignited explosives strapped to his own body. Meanwhile, Sanosuke arrived at the Maikawa Dojo, only to find it in utter ruins. The culprit had already vanished without a trace. Walking back alone, Kenshin was weighed down by heavy thoughts. It was then that he finally came face to face with the mastermind behind all these attacks. Kenshin was shocked to see a face that bore a striking resemblance to someone he remembered. It was Yukishiro Enishi, the younger brother of Kenshin's late wife, Yukishiro Tomoe. For 14 years, Enishi abandoned everything and went to Shanghai, his heart burning with only a raging fire of revenge. He told Kenshin that everything he had done so far was merely the beginning. Enishi demanded of Kenshin whether he would kill him too, with that same defiled sword, just as he had killed his sister. What he sought to inflict on Kenshin was not mere physical pain, but endless suffering. Devastated, Kenshin returned to the Kamiya Dojo in a state of despair unlike anything his friends had ever seen, filling them all with deep unease. At the same time, Saito Hajime, through Cho's intelligence, uncovered Yukishiro Enishi's weapons cache in Yokohama. At Enishi's residence, the Shanghai tycoon Wu Haishin visited him, reminding Enishi not to forget their agreement. It turned out that Enishi had already struck a deal with Wu Haishin beforehand. Once Enishi avenged his sister, he would hand over control to Wu Haishin and assist him in taking over Japan. After Wu Haishin left, Enishi recalled the memory of his sister trying to stop him from seeking revenge. He could never understand why Tomoe would protect the very man who had murdered her fiancé and destroyed her happiness. Back at the dojo, Seeing his friends endangered because of him, Kenshin finally decided to stop hiding the truth. He revealed the long-buried story from the blood-soaked days of the Edo period. Years ago, as the feared Batasai the Manslayer, Kenshin had slain a samurai during a mission. In his final moments, driven by an intense will to live, that samurai managed to slash a wound across Kenshin's face. That samurai's fiancé was none other than Yukishiro Tomoe. To avenge her lost love, Tomoe infiltrated Kenshin's life as a spy. Kenshin was drawn to her unique grace, and amid his blood-soaked life as an assassin, Tomoe became his only solace. But as days passed and they grew closer, Tomoe gradually fell in love with the very man who had stolen her happiness. In him, she saw a gentleness that transcended killing, and glimpsed the inner turmoil and pain he carried within.
君が一度は失った幸せを今度こそ俺が守り抜いてみせる。
In the end, during an assassination attempt on Kenshin, Tomoe shielded him by stepping in front of the attacker. Kenshin's desperate strike killed the attacker, but also pierced Tomoe's body. In her final breath, she carved a second cut across Kenshin's cheek, completing the cross-shaped scar. And young Yukishiro Enishi had witnessed it all. Tomoe's death planted an unshakable seed of hatred in Enishi's heart. After hearing this harrowing tale, everyone fell silent. They finally understood that the weight Kenshin carried was far heavier than any of them had imagined. Alone in the pouring rain, Kenshin stood surrounded by anguish and solitude. Kaoru knew that this profound love and guilt were scars etched permanently into Kenshin's soul. She understood that Kenshin had always loved Tomoe. However, Megumi's words awakened her. Megumi said that the living can create new memories, something the late Miss Tomoe could no longer do. Kaoru took a red umbrella and went to find Kenshin, terrified he might vanish again to protect them. She handed the umbrella to Kenshin, showing him through her actions that this time they would face it together. Just then, Aoshi and Misao of the Oniwabanshu arrived from Kyoto, bringing with them Tomoe's diary. This journal recorded the final chapter of Yukishiro Tomoe's life and held her truest feelings for Kenshin. It turned out the Oniwabanshu had also learned of a major event brewing in Tokyo, tied directly to the legendary Hitokiri Batosai. A great battle was now imminent. Saito Hajime led the police in a raid on Inishi's hideout, only to fall into an ambush and suffer heavy losses. Meanwhile, the real Junchu plan was now fully activated. Countless flyers bearing the words Junchu rained down from the sky. Immediately afterward, Inishi's allies launched indiscriminate artillery strikes across Tokyo, plunging the city into fire and chaos. A band of desperate outlaws rampaged through the flames, targeting everyone connected to Kenshin. Even the Kamiya dojo was not spared. Enishi himself led the assault. Sanosuke stepped forward to defend the dojo, but was effortlessly overwhelmed by Enishi. The gap in their strength was immense. Though thrown aside repeatedly, Sanosuke kept rising, shielding the others with his body. Inishi's subordinate, Yatsume Mumyoi, went door to door searching for Kenshin, leaving trails of corpses in his wake. At the critical moment, Aoshi arrived just in time, and the two clashed instantly. Misao also rushed in to aid Aoshi, fighting off the invaders and protecting the citizens. Meanwhile, Kenshin encountered another of Enishi's henchmen on the street. The man had a machine gun mounted on one arm, and Kenshin swiftly dodged his barrage of fire. However, he was no match for Kenshin and was quickly defeated. Begging Kenshin to grant him an honorable death with a finishing blow, the man pleaded for meaning in his end. But Kenshin refused. He had sworn never to kill again. Meanwhile, Aoshi, while defending civilians, was gravely wounded by an explosion. At that moment, inside the dojo, Yukishiro Enishi was confronting Kaoru. Kaoru summoned her courage and demanded to know if he was indeed Yukishiro Enishi. She tried to reason with him, urging him to let go of his hatred. But when Enishi realized it was Kenshin who had told Kaoru about Tomoe, he was utterly enraged. To him, his sister's name was sacred, unworthy to be uttered by the lips of her murderer. By the time Kenshin rushed back to the dojo, it was already too late. Sanosuke lay gravely wounded on the ground and told Kenshin that Kaoru had been taken. Yahiko stood nearby, his face filled with regret and helplessness. Meanwhile, the real Kaoru awoke in a strange room. She realized she was inside Yukishiro Enishi's stronghold, where he was preparing to launch his final assault, not only against Kenshin, but against the entire era he despised. Kaoru tried to stop him, telling Enishi that Tomoe would never have wanted this outcome. Enishi's fury reached its peak. He seized Kaoru by the throat, intent on killing this woman whose smile so closely resembled his sister's. Yet, in Kaoru's sorrowful eyes, he saw the very expression Tomoe had worn in her final moments. At his lowest point, Kenshin remembered the unwavering support of his friends and found the strength to rise again. They reminded him that his life no longer belonged to himself alone. It carried the hopes of everyone who believed in him.
Yahiko, Sano Taro.
Finally emerging from the shadows, Kenshin resolved to go to Enishi's stronghold and end everything once and for all. Just then, Misao suddenly burst into the fray. She loudly declared her identity as the representative of Aoshi Shinomori, leader of the Oniwa Banshu. Moments later, the still injured Sanosuke and Saito Hajime arrived to reinforce them, carving a path through the enemy lines so Kenshin could reach the heart of the base. When Kenshin entered the building, he was ambushed by Wu Haishin. Surrounded by gunmen, Kenshin nonetheless cut through their ranks with ease. Then, someone utterly unexpected appeared, Sojiro, the deadliest assassin of the 10 Swords. Just as Kenshin braced to face Sojiro's attack, he realized the strike wasn't aimed at him. After his defeat by Kenshin, Sojiro had lost his purpose in life and chose to become a wandering ronin. Now, he stood on Kenshin's side, holding back the pursuers behind him. He wanted to witness firsthand how Kenshin would use his reverse blade sword to sever the chains of hatred. Sojiro held off wave after wave of enemies, buying Kenshin the chance to press forward. At last, Kenshin stood before Enishi. Enishi's hatred for Kenshin had long since extended beyond Kenshin himself. It now encompassed everything he stood to protect. The final battle began. Enishi's sword strikes were fueled by berserk rage, each one lethal. Kenshin, meanwhile, sought not victory, but redemption through defense. Enishi's attacks came like a storm, determined to make Kenshin suffer the same agony his sister had endured. Inside the room, Kaoru noticed Tomoe's portrait and the windmill sitting atop a cabinet. Meanwhile, Kenshin was driven back relentlessly, his body battered and bleeding. Enishi demanded he take his own life to atone for his past sins, but Kenshin refused. He knew that death was not atonement. His only answer was to live and fight for the peaceful future his friends and Tomoe had hoped for.
Enishi, お前に見える巴は今も笑っているか?
Those words completely shattered Enishi's mental defenses, bringing back the memory of his sister's sorrowful gaze in her final moments. Kenshin told him that it was understandable to hate him, but that his way of seeking vengeance was wrong.
Enishi.
At that instant, a bullet struck Kenshin's body. Wu Haishin stood laughing, gun raised toward Enishi, shouting that he would kill them both. But Kaoru suddenly leapt in front, shielding Enishi. Wu Haishin's betrayal enraged Enishi beyond measure.
カオル殿を守ってくれてありがとう。
俺守りたかったのが。
The battle ended. Enishi was arrested and imprisoned. Kaoru sent him Tomoe's diary. In its pages, Enishi finally understood his sister's heart. She wrote that Kenshin was the one who took away her happiness, and also the one who gave her happiness again. She believes that the future Kenshin will save more people, and she will risk her life to protect him. The truth pierced Enishi like a blade. He realized his years of vengeance had utterly betrayed Tomoe's wishes. In his prison cell, he broke down, weeping uncontrollably. With everything settled, the Kamiya dojo returned to its former warmth and laughter. Kenshin and Kaoru visited Tomoe's grave together. Kaoru told Kenshin she believed it was Tomoe who had protected her in the end. She asked him what he had whispered to Tomoe at her tombstone.
謙信は巴さんに何を？
カオル殿と同じでござる。ありがとう。それとすまない。さようなら。
Kenshin, now at peace with his past, simply took Kaoru's hand, and together they walked toward the new era awaiting them. The guilt-ridden wanderer had finally discovered the true meaning of living, to protect the happiness right before his eyes.